an interview with Tom Cruise and Matt Lauer from the 2000s just resurfaced and went viral once again. And these debates tend to crop up every once in a while about the efficacy and ethical questions around antidepressants and psychiatric drugs in general. And in this infamous interview, Tom Cruise is condemning Big Pharma for selling a medical solution to psychiatric ailments that could be solved in other ways. It's a very controversial interview that I believe people have reconsidered over the years, and now the sentiment seems to be that Tom Cruise was right all along. Other people are very firmly in the other camp that antidepressants are necessary to treat a chemical imbalance in the brain that is impossible to cure. And I did just see that same debate happening before this clip went viral. Matt Walsh was participating in it, and he said that the chemical imbalance theory has been disproven. But let's react to this interview before we get into it.
Where I talk out against drugs and psychiatric abuses of electric shocking people, okay, against their will, of drugging children with them not knowing the effects of these drugs. Do you know what Adderall is? Do you know Ritalin? Do you know now that Ritalin is a street drug? Do you understand that?
The difference is this was not against her will, though. But this wasn't against Brooke's will.
Matt, I'm asking you a question.
I understand there's abuse of all of these things.
No, you see, here's the problem. You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do. All it does is mask the problem, Matt. And if you understand the history of it, it masks the problem. That's what it does. That's all it does. You're not getting to the reason why. There is no such thing as a chemical imbalance. I'm saying that drugs aren't the answer, that these drugs are very dangerous. They're mind-altering, antipsychotic drugs. And there are ways of doing it without that so that we don't end up in a brave new world.
Yes, there are abuses. And yes, maybe they've gone too far in certain areas. Maybe there are too many kids on Ritalin. Maybe electric shock.
Too many kids on Ritalin, Matt.
I'm just saying. But aren't there examples where it works?
Matt, you don't even, you're glib. You don't even know what Ritalin is. If you start talking about chemical imbalance, you have to evaluate and read the research papers on how they came up with these theories, Matt, okay? That's what I've done. And you go and you say, where's the medical test? Where's the blood test that says how much Ritalin you're supposed to get?
It's very impressive to listen to you because clearly you've done the homework and you know the subject.
And you should. And you should do that also because just knowing people who are on Ritalin isn't enough. You should be a little bit more responsible in knowing
I'm
really...
not prescribing Ritalin, Tom, and I'm not asking anyone else to do it.
Well, you are. You're saying... No,
I know some people who seem to have been helped by it.
But you're saying, but it's like, this is a very important issue.
This is a very,
and you know what, and you're here on the Today Show.
Right.
And to talk about it in a way of saying, well, isn't it okay, and being reasonable about it when you don't know, and I do. I think that you should be a little bit more responsible in knowing what it is, because you communicate to people.
He also knows to tell you to turn the motion smoothing off on your TV.
I love motion smoothing.
I know you do.
I stand by that. One thing you should keep in mind, it almost goes without saying, is that Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. And one of the very strict moral requirements of Scientologists is that they do not take any sort of psychiatric medication or any drugs in general. And they also have some very strange ideas about human psychology that I also object to. Not necessarily anything that Tom Cruise was saying in that clip, but, you know, they are in the practice of basically psychologically terrorizing people to the point where they can get to clear. They have to divulge all of their personal secrets, shadows, and everything they've ever done wrong to authorities in the Church of Scientology.
Which then gets turned back on you if you ever decide to leave the church.
And that's in the pursuit of reaching a state of clear. And that is, in fact, used as a tool of blackmail and fear to keep people in the cult. But if we're just going to judge by what Tom Cruise was saying in this clip alone, what do you think?
Yes. I was on Adderall for years and regret it as much good as it did do at times to help, it did not fix the problem. It masked the problem. It gave a temporary fix to a long-term issue that was not tenable. I was never going to be able to be on the drug my entire life. I probably should not have been on it even when I was. And what I had to do when I got sober was learn a whole bunch of techniques to deal with the fact that I have a very, very, very short attention span. And it's something I still struggle with to this day, a lot of times when I'm at work. But everything that I had to learn to deal with it were things that you have to learn to deal with in general. It's just that as a kid, they don't want to take the time to help you with that. They just want to toss you on medication and say, figure it out.
So would you say you're like Tom Cruise against all the uses of these psychiatric medications?
I don't know about the other ones. I know that Adderall should not be prescribed to kids.
Adderall specifically, but
I can only speak about that one because that's the one that I took.
But it would be fine if an adult took it.
I mean, I don't know if it's, then we get into my philosophy on, now we're getting into my philosophy on whether adults should be stopped from doing anything. But I know that kids
it also comes with huge interests.
Kids cannot consent and should not be put on the medication.
The Adderall thing, it's not just about someone's decision to take it or not, because there are huge moneyed interests in people taking these drugs, even if they don't need them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
or even if there's no argument that they need
There's
them.
a huge part of it, right? Is like a big part of the Adderall use when you get into high school and college is just is it being sold to other kids and cramming for tests.
Sure.
Like that's a very, very obvious and understandable outcome that was always going to happen with those medications when you're just giving kids legal speed.
Phil, do you fall on either side of this debate?
I mean, look, it's bad to give kids a bunch of drugs, and I think that Tom Cruise is probably right. I like anyone that, makes Matt Lauer look kind of silly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not generally a fan of Tom Cruise's religion.
Yeah, I don't think many people are.
So, there's that. His Katie Holmes is the woman that he was there.
Yeah, this was around the same time that he got with Katie Holmes and was having like crazy manic episodes.
Yeah.
on air.
I'm not a fan of that stuff, but that's kind of out of context. I mean, at least for the purposes of what we're discussing here, I think that Tom Cruise is doing pretty good stuff. Yeah.
As for like I said, the fixing these problems are such multifaceted issues that it's very, very difficult because they want to get you in and out. The doctors want to get you in and out of the office and toss you in with a script and put you on your way, keeps you on the medication for life, which turns you into a patient, which turns you into money, because then, now you're doing that for years. And maybe that's just my own reaction because I had my own issues and my own problems. And the last thing that I would ever want to do to be again is a prisoner to the medical industrial complex, to be reliant on medication 24/7, which very much is like a prison. Like if we're talking about, if we're not even talking about antipsychotics or Adderall, but if you get addicted to any other substance, whether it's painkillers, whether it's like Xanax, something like that, or a barbiturate, your life in a lot of ways is over. Like you can't travel, you can't do it. Like everything relies on where you're going to get the medication next. Especially if you're not getting it legally. Then a lot of times it started out as something you got because you got injured or because for any number of reasons. And as it goes on and you become more and more dependent on it, you can't get away from it, and you start basing your day around your access to that medication. And saddling a child with that at a young age and putting it into their brain that they need something like that every day is not something that should be done with one interview in 30 minutes with a general practitioner.
Right, yeah. One of the comments here says Tom Cruise is incredibly successful, in great shape for his age, and seems to have a relatively stable life as far as I can see. Scientology has some good points because at its core, it's basically self-help until you get to the weird stuff.
Well, the weird stuff, I mean, any religion where you have to pay to learn about the aliens.
Yeah, it seems like it's just weird through and through.
Yeah.
And it's not actually just a self-help book. If it were as simple as that, it wouldn't operate the way that it does. And this sounds incredibly naive. Also, Tom Cruise does not have the most stable personal life.
No.
I've looked into it, and it's not great. He has bad relationships with his children and stuff like that. But
he
aside
makes
from him
fantastic
being
movies.
less credible, like he's not the most credible source to hear this message, but there's a moment that people are ready to hear it. And it was not in the 2000s, when I'm sure that there was far less questioning of psychiatric medications and big pharma in general.
Oddly enough, wouldn't it have been swapped at that time? Wouldn't the left have been the ones that left in Hollywood would have been the ones, crunchy hippie, and the right would have been like, look, my dad was a pharmaceutical executive, and it's fine.
Things have flipped pretty dramatically in that way.
And one thing they're not talking about is like, look, if the doctor isn't talking to you about your diet and exercise, they're not doing their job.
Well, everyone knows that they're not coming at this with a holistic approach, and they're not coming at this with the best interests of the patient in mind.
Because telling you to get exercise, telling you to eat well doesn't make them any money. It actually gives you less of a reason to go to the doctor if you feel good. So what is the best way for the pharmaceutical industrial complex to get you there is to say, well, for you to feel good, you need to take this medication that you then have to see a general practitioner every 3 months so that they can re-up you and make sure that you're stable and taking the medication as needed. Sure, sounds like they care about you because they're asking to see you on a regular basis. Well, no, it's because that gives them a reason to charge your copay.
We have
every
a
3
20
months.
from Pop Culture Junkie. Having had a lot of family and friends with mental health issues, my conclusion is that the percentage of people who can be really helped with psychoactive drugs is very, very small, massively overprescribed, lazy psychiatrists. Well, the factors that have been found objectively, like what factors into happiness, is community, and earned success and genetics. Some people are genetically happier than others. There's only so much you can do about that. But if you have come to a psychiatrist before you addressed those two things, finding community and pursuing earned success, well, you're clearly not looking for the hard way out, right? And it's not to impugn anybody's intentions, but I also feel like I'm not firmly on either side of the debate. I'm not really willing to say that I'm like anti everything all the time.
Well, that's not a
probably
fair position.
most of the time.
That's not a fair position to put anyone in,
but
because these are these should be treated as case by case basis. But I don't think it's hard for anybody to believe that that all of this is overprescribed.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Like, I actually think that your average drug dealer on the street is more honest to you than as an adult than the medical industrial complex that's prescribing your kids Ritalin.
Sure.
Like, an adult who chooses to use some substance in the comfort of their own home, I have way less of a problem with that. Getting it from the street, although it's as dangerous as it is, I have way less of a problem with that because he's an adult making his own decisions than I do the rate at which we prescribe meds to kids these days.
Mm-hmm. Personally, I was prescribed SSRIs for a short time when I was a kid, and I noticed like there's kind of a lot of catastrophizing and fear-mongering about it ruining your life.
How so?
Like, that I've noticed, at least from the types of people who are in these online circles. It didn't like do anything terrible to me. It just didn't really help, and then I just stopped using them. And it wasn't like this, it didn't have to be this like big earth-shattering realization. It was just like, well, that was kind of useless.
It's usually for people who are on it long term, where it does have strong benefits for them, where when they go off it, they start to suffer real setbacks.
Is it benefits, or is it that you haven't found a way to cope with life outside of it? That's the thing. It's
the chemical, it's the pill form of what maybe could have been done in your everyday life. But the thing is for a lot of them, the withdrawal from antidepressants can be brutal from everything that I've heard. And again, like I said, all of this stuff are things that you shouldn't take lightly. Going through opiate withdrawal, whether it's heroin, whether it's OxyContin, anything like that, going through it, I wouldn't wish it on my worst. If I had a worst enemy, first thing I'd be doing is recommending them this podcast. And the second thing I would be doing is saying, I don't want you to ever have to go through that. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But those decisions for adults are vastly different than what we're doing to kids. And you're not going to go through withdrawal if you take the kids off the Adderall, but you are going to make it a gap in how they learn to deal with stressful situations that acquire their attention. The biggest example being like if they're going to college, if they're going to school, suddenly they don't have access to the medication and they don't know how to cope with the stress of exams, the stress of their workload in classes without the medication. And the argument is like, well, they need it, sure, but they should be capable of dealing with it on their own. And the only way to do that is to teach them those techniques young, not put them on the medication.
Yeah, they shouldn't have been put in that helpless position against their will in the first place, basically. Yeah. Well, that was our obligatory praise for Tom Cruise for the day. Pull out the devotional candle for everyone.
Oh, good grief.
There he is. We have the biggest Tom Cruise fan on the planet on this podcast.
It's so not even true. This was a gift. This was a gift.
Have you burnt it?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's still sealed.
I do need the Glenn Powell candle to go with it.
Was that the Illuminati symbol in there? On the seal?
Yes.
I never even noticed that before.
It says Illuminidal.
Great.
No, what? Like, this podcast is cursed, and now we know why.
This is sacrilege! All right.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media, and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.